Hi, welcome to Hillcrest Sermons, growing together.
Show us your heart's delight.
My name is Tim. I am on the teaching team here at Hillcrest, and it is just, I'm always struck by what a gift it is to get to unpack Scripture and to do so in partnership with you. I really am grateful for the way that we partner together to explore Scripture. I get to set time aside to pray and study and prepare, but really, this only works as you and I work together, and it's the sensitive and open hearts of this church family, the people who take notes and think and then talk about it during the week and wrestle out what God is doing in their lives. It's this partnership, and God's Spirit kind of undergirds it as we together walk into God's heart for us. So just thank you for that. I am so appreciative of you. We're in a series on Judges right now, and we're going to continue that today. So I want to invite you, if you want to open up in your Bibles, to Judges chapter 13. Judges is way to the left in your Bibles. It's right after Joshua. It's right before the book of Ruth. We're going to be picking up where we left off last week. Judges, as we've said before, when we hear judge, we shouldn't think Judge Judy. We should think tribal warrior leader. These are warriors that God has raised up to rescue his people. And we've talked about this different weeks, how there's this kind of recurring cycle that we see through the book of Judges. And I think we even have a slide that is an image of this. There we go. The people of God, they live in peace for some time. And what inevitably happens is the people begin pursuing worship of idols, other false gods, and that distorts their hearts. It leads them into lives of injustice, so idolatry and injustice. And then God, out of his fierce grace to wake them up, allows other people groups to conquer them. And so Israel is oppressed. Israel, out of that, then their pain of this oppression, they cry out to God for help. God responds to their cry and raises up one of these judges or tribal warriors. God raises them up, and then this judge delivers them, defeats the enemies, and so they live in freedom and peace again for some time until this cycle repeats itself. We've seen this over and over described in the book of Judges. But not only that, we've said this cycle isn't just simply repeating, but there's this real sense that it's going downhill. It's also, in a sense, a spiral, that each time they go through this cycle, that it's kind of going down. The unfaithfulness of the people and even the unfaithfulness of the judges themselves continues downhill. Last week, Christian unpacked the story of Gideon for us. And we saw that Gideon began kind of in hesitant faithfulness, but really ended in just, he's amassing power, he's acting as a king. He actually makes an idol for the people of God to worship. Like, we know things have gone off the rails. And if you've read the book of Judges you've been reading this fall, there's actually a couple more judges after Gideon. We're not going to talk about during the series, but after Gideon is Abimelech, which was Gideon's son. My father is king. Christian mentioned that last week. But Abimelech, who actually killed all his brothers, all Gideon's other sons, executes them. And then after Abimelech is this man named Jephthah, who ends up sacrificing his own daughter. Like, things are going off the rails. And then this week, we're going to come to the final judge in the book of Judges, a man by the name of Samson, who you might have heard of before. But the final judge in the book of Judges. So we're going to pick up right where Colleen read earlier. We're going to pick up in Judges 13, verse 1, as we look at how the life of this last judge in the book of Judges. There's actually some judges outside of the book of Judges, but this last one in the book of Judges, how his life begins. So Judges 13, verse 1, we read, "Again, the Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord. So the Lord delivered them into the hands of the Philistines for 40 years." So we just showed that picture of this cycle. This is the beginning of the cycle again, right? They had peace, and then they start doing evil. That's worshiping these idols, idolatry and injustice. And so God gives them, out of his severe grace, gives them over to these Philistines to rule over them. Now, if we've been paying attention, what ought we expect the next thing to happen to be? What have the people of God always done when they were ruled over by another people group? Cry out. What is conspicuously absent in verse 1? they don't cry out. They don't cry out. And you need to know, these are not, the writer of Judges is a master storyteller. These are not things inadvertently left out. We've talked how the authors of the Hebrew stories often show more than tell. They're very specific about the details they put in and the details they leave out. And the author wants us to see the people of God no longer cry out. A couple weeks ago, Christian even talked about how as the Israelites, as they were oppressed by these foreign people groups, they were being re-Egyptized. In their time in Egypt, as they're oppressed as slaves in Egypt, they're in some ways returning to that state. They no longer even cry out. And I think this scripture raises the question for us. Have you ever been in a time in your life that was so dark you couldn't even cry out to God? That the guilt, the sense of shame, that God doesn't want anything to do with me, maybe the numbness from the hurt, you just don't have the energy. Maybe a sense of it doesn't matter, a sense of lack of hope. You can't even cry out anymore. The people of God are at a place they can't even cry out to God. I'm convinced there's a spiritual enemy to God, Satan, and that Satan loves nothing more than when people believe they can no longer cry out to God. The people are at a place they can no longer even cry out, but God does not leave them there. Let's pick up in verse 2. We read, a certain man of Zorah, that's a town, a certain man of Zorah named Manoah from the clan of the Danites. This is a clan, a tribe within the Israelites, the people of God. Manoah had a wife who was childless, unable to give birth. And the angel of the Lord appeared to her and said, "You are barren and childless, but you are going to become pregnant and give birth to a son. Now, see to it you drink no wine or other fermented drink, and that you do not eat anything unclean. You will become pregnant and have a son whose head is to never be touched by a razor, because the boy is to be a Nazarite, dedicated to God from the womb. And he will take the lead in delivering Israel from the hands of the Philistines." In spite of the people of God not crying out, God still acts to rescue them. See, what we're going to see in this story of this final judge is God is committed. God's committed. He's committed to a number of things. One, at the largest level, God is committed to this rescue mission to all the peoples of the earth that he began at the beginning of Scriptures. God promised to Abraham, God said, through your descendants, who would become the people of Israel, God said, through your descendants, I will bless the world. I will heal and undo the effects of sin. The way sin and evil and death has broke loose in the world, I promise I will work to forgive and heal and restore what has gone wrong. And Abraham, I'm going to do it through your descendants. God is committed to that. And there are times where the people of God, the Israelites, are either on the brink of being physically wiped out or on the brink of being spiritually assimilated and wiped out in the spiritual sense. And in spite of the Israelites, in spite of the people of God running the opposite direction away from God, God is committed. He will not allow his rescue mission to the world to fail. And so in spite of them, he continues to work to deliver and rescue them. This is God's fierce grace at work. And we see God says, I'm gonna rescue you, and I'm going to do it through this child to be born. This child is going to be a Nazarite. And the Nazarite, if this is new to you, it's a particular religious vow that's described in the Hebrew Scriptures. It could be temporary, or for this child, it's going to be his whole life. And essentially, there's three main components that a Nazarite, they can't eat or touch or have anything to do with like grape products, so wine. That's why it talked about the alcohol. 2, they aren't supposed to touch or eat anything unclean. A big source of uncleanness in this time was dead bodies, not supposed to touch dead things. And then 3, interestingly enough, they're not supposed to cut their hair. And so this is where Samson's famous long hair that gives him his strength comes from. And so Samson is like the Superman of the book of Judges. And instead of kryptonite, it's haircuts. And so here we have this child to be born who's going to be the deliverer. And so I want to jump ahead now. So we see Samson's birth. I want to jump ahead to his adult life. So flip over a page to chapter 14 now. And we're going to see how this calling on his life begins to work out or not work out as it is. So let's pick up at the beginning of chapter 14. I'm going to begin in chapter 14, verse 1 there. So Samson went down to Timnah. Timnah is a Philistine town. Went down to Timnah and there saw a young Philistine woman. When he returned, he said to his father and mother, I have seen a Philistine woman in Timnah. Now get her for me as my wife. His father and mother replied, isn't there an acceptable woman among your relatives or among all our people? Must you go to the uncircumcised Philistines to get a wife? But Samson said to his father, get her for me. She's the right one for me. Pause there for a moment. All right, so if this story is new to you, first of all, you might say, like, what's the deal? Why are they so against him marrying this girl from another town? He's crushing on the Philistine. Let him pursue the Philistine. Like, what's the big deal? Here's the thing. So in the Hebrew scriptures, God's very clear, like he doesn't want his people marrying these people from other people groups. And it's not like an ethnicity thing, a DNA thing. It's a spiritual thing. God says when you marry people who worship these other gods, these idols, when you marry them, you're going to end up worshiping the idols too. And so Israelites, I want you to marry Israelites so that you keep marrying other worshipers of me. I want to maintain a people of faithfulness. But Samson says, no, I want her, I'm going to get her. I want her, I'm going to get her. Now, the NIV, the way it translates it, it says, she's the right one for me. But in the Hebrew, a literal translation is something like this. And do we have this? It says, get her for me, for she is right in my eyes. She is right in my eyes. Now, once again, the author of Judges, master storyteller. These little details were meant to catch them right. They're right in Samson's eyes. When did we just hear about someone's eyes a moment ago? Chapter 13, verse 1. We read it twice this morning already. What do we hear? Go back to, go ahead. I think the next slide has this. It says, again, the Israelites did evil in the ears, the eyes of the Lord. See, central in the book of Judges is this question of when things happen, whose eyes are they right or wrong in? The Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord. The last verse of the book of Judges. Let's go ahead to that. This is the last sentence of this entire book. In those days, there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in their own eyes. Samson says, I want her. I'm going to get her. She's right in my eyes. If you're familiar with the way the story of Samson ends, side note, you might catch what happens to Samson's eyes. He says, this is right in my eyes. I want her. I'm going to get her. It's really interesting the way this story is told. Samson, in a lot of ways, embodies the choices of the people of God. The Israelites, they were given a particular destiny, a calling to be God's rescue mission people, to be set apart to show the world what God's heart was like. Samson was given a particular destiny, a calling to be set apart as a Nazarite and be the rescuer of the people of God. They each had these callings. God's people chase after other lovers. They chase after other idols, other gods, other foreign gods. Samson, too, chases after other lovers, chases after these Philistine women. They're both abandoning their callings. They're both doing what is right in their own eyes, which I think raises a question for us. The text pushes on us. What are we chasing after that is right in our own eyes? What are your other lovers? What are those other things that you go after, that I go after, that we make the most important thing, even above our calling that God has put in our lives? What are those other things that we look to give us a sense of identity? What are those other things that shape our decisions in life more than faithfulness to the living God? What are those places that you're doing what is right in your own eyes? What are those places where I'm doing what is right in my own eyes? I'm chasing after other lovers. Samson, like the people of God, chooses to do what is right in his own eyes, to chase after other lovers than the living God. I'm going to summarize for us kind of what happens next, because we're going to jump ahead. What ends up happening is Samson ends up having a wedding with this woman. Actually, a drinking feast. Notice he's not supposed to be drinking. He has this wedding with this woman. He ends up killing some Philistines. In revenge, the Philistines actually kill the woman and her family. In revenge to that, Samson kills a whole bunch more Philistines. Then he goes and hides out in this cave. And then we're going to pick up in chapter 15 with the Philistines hunting Samson down. So let's jump ahead to chapter 15. We're going to be in verse 9. They've had these actions of violence and reprisal. Samson's hiding. The Philistines are now looking for him. And this is how this part of the story plays out. The Philistines went up and camped in Judah, spreading out near Lehi. The people of Judah asked, "Why have you come to fight us?" Pause there. So Judah, just so we all know, Judah is another tribe in Israel. These are Samson's countrymen, right? They're all the same people of God, just a different tribe. So why have you come to fight us? The Philistines replied, "We have come to take Samson prisoner." They answered, "To do to him as he did to us." Then 3,000 men from Judah went down to the cave in the rock of Etam and said to Samson, "Don't you realize the Philistines are rulers over us? What have you done to us?" He answered, "I merely did to them what they did to me." Which, side note, I think I have heard the same conversation in my house a lot of times. What's going on? I did to her what she did to me. I did to her what... Yes, that's happened. I probably did. When I was a 5-year-old, 6, 7, 8, 10, 18-year-old, I was doing the same thing to my brother. All right. Verse 12. So this is the people of Judah again speaking to Samson. They said to him, "We have come to tie you up and hand you over to the Philistines." Samson said, "Swear to me that you won't kill me yourselves." "Agreed," they answered. "We will only tie you up and hand you over to them. We will not kill you." So they bound him with 2 new ropes and led him up from the rock. And as he approached Lehi, the Philistines came toward him shouting. The Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon him. That's Samson. The ropes on his arms became like charred flax, and the bindings dropped from his hands. Finding a fresh jawbone of a donkey, remember, dead body, jawbone of a donkey, he grabbed it and struck down 1,000 men. Then Samson said, "With the donkey's jawbone, I have made donkeys of them. With the donkey's jawbone, I have killed 1,000 men." When he finished speaking, he threw away the jawbone, and the place was called Ramath Lehi. So, as we see here, the Philistines are looking for Samson because of this cycle of violence and revenge. Judah ties him up, hands him over. Samson does this as kind of like a trap because he knows he can break free. He breaks free, then he picks up this the part of a donkey carcass, which we know he's not supposed to be touching. Then he kills these 1,000 men, and then he makes a song of it, which is quite in contrast. Earlier in this series, we talked about Deborah, who gave praise to God when God gave her and Israel victory. Here, Samson essentially mocks the dead after this victory. And this is the leader of the people of God at this point. But I want to go back. I want to go back to a line earlier in this account that I think is quite important. In verse 11, we read what the people of Judah said to Samson. And they asked him this question: "Don't you realize the Philistines are rulers over us? Don't you realize the Philistines are ruler over us?" And there's this deep irony in it, because the people of Judah, who are they meant to be ruled by? They're meant to be ruled by God. Like they're meant to be people whose one king and ruler is the living God. But they have come to this place where, no, we are ruled over by the Philistines. You could say it this way: they loved foreign gods, they loved foreign idols, and so foreign people began to rule over them. And then we have Samson, who's no more free than them. Samson is ruled over by his lust for revenge. His lust, I'm going to do to them what they did to me. And Samson is meant to be ruled over by his calling by God, but instead he's ruled over by his anger and desire for revenge. What I see going on here is this reality that what they are both, you can say it this way: what they love most rules over them. See, I think sometimes, and maybe this is even you. You might be kind of a person who's a skeptic. Maybe you wouldn't describe yourself as a person of faith. You're a seeker. You're a question asker. And I think sometimes there's this idea that if you follow Jesus, that you're kind of ruled over by God. But if you live your own life, kind of your skeptic seeker life, it's a life of freedom. But the reality is, and Scripture gives witnesses over and over again, everyone loves something most and is ruled by it. Everybody is ruled by something or someone. Because the truth is, whatever you want most in life, whatever you love most, whatever you need to be happy, whatever you need to give you your sense of safety and security and identity in your life, that will rule over you. And no human being is free from that reality. Whatever you love most will rule you. I think it raises the question: what rules us? What rules you? I think about people trapped in a need to have a certain body image, this love to have a certain body image. And that need to have that body image, that begins to rule you. Or a social media image, to be perceived a certain way on social media. That if you love that most, that will rule you. Or your own physical health. If that's the most important thing in your life, that will rule you. Or your kids' health. If that is the most important thing to you, it will rule you. Or maybe success in school or success in sports, maybe a certain kind of job. If that is what you love most, it will rule you. Whatever you love most will end up ruling you. Because you will be ruled by anxiety of trying to get it. Once you get it, you will be ruled by fear of trying to keep it. And then, like Samson, if you lose it, you'll be ruled by anger because you don't have it anymore. It's the right girlfriend or boyfriend, whatever you love most will rule you. The question, central to the Jesus movement, is not the idea that there's some kind of perfect freedom, like I can do whatever I want, because then even if we believe that, our own desire, our need for freedom will rule us. Central to the Jesus movement is the idea is that Jesus has come to deliver us from other rulers and to bring us under his good sacrificial love rulership called the kingdom of God. And the good news of the Jesus movement is that we can be ruled by a good God who loves you and knows you and made you and loves you so much to give his very life for you. The redemptive, rulership of Jesus. So the story of Samson, I think, presses on us. What rules us? What rules you? I think about even my role here in pastoral ministry at Hillcrest. The rulers that threaten my heart, the rulers of need for approval, desire to be liked, desire to be admired. That wherever we're at, and I feel this in my own heart, there are rulers that threaten us. Things that threaten to become our chief love. And Jesus again and again calls us back. Let me be your number one. Let me rule you. So Samson, the story, it shows us of the people of Judah and Samson himself being ruled, loving most, and being ruled by other things. But the story doesn't end there. I want to just read these last couple verses of chapter 15 and see how this story wraps up. It says in verse 18, it says, because he was very thirsty, he cried out to the Lord. You have given your servant this great victory. Must I now die of thirst and fall into the hands of the uncircumcised? It was a strange thing to shout out, but ultimately it's a prayer. He's speaking to God. And then God opened up the hollow place in Lehi, and water came out of it. And when Samson drank, his strength returned, and he revived. So the spring was called En-Hakkor, and it was still there in Lehi. When I see this story of Samson, I see ultimately the story of a God who doesn't give up on his people. A God who doesn't give up. I see a story of God who's committed first and foremost to his rescue mission to all the world. When God had made this promise, said, Abraham, through your descendants, I'm going to bless and heal and undo the effects of sin in all the world. And even when the people of God are running away from him, God says, I will not abandon you. I will physically preserve you, and I will spiritually preserve you. And God actually acts. God uses the unfaithfulness, the unfaithful violence of Samson. God mysteriously uses that even to preserve his people. God is committed to his rescue mission to all the world. God is not only committed to his rescue mission, people, all the world, God's committed to his people. These people have entered into covenant with him. God says, I won't, even when you don't want me, I'm not going to abandon you. I'm going to keep chasing after you. And I love that this is true still today. The church that has been grafted on and grafted into the story of Israel. God says, yes, there are consequences. When people abandon me, there are real world consequences. There's consequences in the story, but God will not allow his kingdom people to disappear from this earth. He is committed to his people. He is committed to his mission. And God is committed to you and I. I love at the end of that little water scene at the end of the Samson story, even when Samson in his violence and his revenge and his mocking, even when he's being a dunderhead, when he cries out with a shred of faith, God meets him in grace. Even when we are hanging on by a thread of faith, a shred of faith, even in our mistakes, our walking away from God, God chases us down. God is committed to you and I. Next week, we're going to continue on in the book of Judges. We're going to be looking at Judges 17 and 18. Even though this is the last judge of the book of Judges, there's actually two conclusions to the book of Judges. Christian's going to be talking about the first conclusion next week, so I encourage you to check out Judges 17 and 18. It always helps just to have read the text ahead of time. But I just want to end with this this morning. You know, we did these child dedications this morning, one in first service, one in second service, and we always give each family a Jesus Storybook Bible to read to their kids. And in my family, I've read this to the bigger kids, and now I'm with the younger kids and reading a chapter of this each night with them. Who's read the Jesus Storybook Bible, either for themselves or kids? I would encourage you to do this. Parents or grandparents, aunts and uncles, read this for your kids. Or here's a pro tip. If you are new to faith, you're an adult and you're kind of learning, maybe you've never ever read through the whole Bible, get a Jesus Storybook Bible and read through it. I'm not joking. If you want one, come to me after service. I will give you one. It's that good to orient you to kind of the whole story of Scripture. But I love that in the Jesus Storybook Bible, there's this line that gets repeated over and over again, describing God's work in the world. And it describes God's heart this way. It says, God's never stopping, never giving up, unbreaking, always and forever love. And when I think about the story of Samson and the unfaithfulness of the people of God and the unfaithfulness of Samson, I see behind it God's never stopping, never giving up, unbreaking, always and forever love. And even in the way Samson, even in his failures, how it points ahead to the faithfulness of Jesus. Because what we see, Jesus too was foretold by an angel to a mom who couldn't yet have kids. And Jesus too was foretold to be the rescuer of his people. And Jesus too was given a particular calling and identity to be set apart and to rescue others. Jesus too was ruled over by something, but instead of being ruled over by love from the gal from Timnah, Jesus was ruled over by his Abba Father's love and his heart for all the world. Jesus too was bound up by his countrymen and handed over to the enemies. And Jesus too defeated the enemies, but not through violence, because he knew the ultimate enemies weren't other people. He knew the ultimate enemies were sin and death and Satan. And on the cross, he brought forgiveness. On the resurrection, he broke the power of death itself. And Jesus too gives water that revives us spiritually to everlasting life. Jesus, this story points ahead to Jesus, who is the true embodiment of God's never stopping, never giving up, unbreaking, always and forever love. Let's pray. Lord, every story in Scripture whispers your name. And I just pray this morning, even as we open up this gift of these ancient Hebrew stories passed down by generation of generation, people who trusted you, would you speak a redemptive and present word into our personal lives? Would you call us out where we need to be called out about things that we love more than you, about things that control us more than you? And God, would you remind us of your faithful commitment to us? And not just because some kind of like individualistic, we're the most special people, but because you love all people. You are committed to your rescue mission people to all the world. You're committed to your kingdom community. You're committed to every human being you've made in your image. Lord, affirm that truth in our hearts today. In your name, amen.
Thanks for listening. For more info, visit hcbellingham.com and join us any Sunday, 9 and 11 a.m.